call this meeting of the City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay.
Here.
Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Schiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Webb.
Here.
Okay, the first order of business tonight is the public hearings. For those who are used to our usual order of business, we decided we would switch the public hearings to the very beginning ahead of the council comments and all those other kinds of things so that people who are coming for a public hearing know that it will start at 7:30. So we're going to have a public hearing on the speed hump requests on the 7600 block of Hammond Avenue as well as on the 1100 block of Merwood Drive. So I know that there was not, correct? There was not a sign-up sheet over there. So anybody who would like to speak at the public hearing about either one of those two blocks for speed humps, if you would come to the podium and identify yourself and give us your comments.
Good evening, all. Fortunately, I have this opportunity to speak with you guys today. As you're aware, I'm a police officer here, but I live in the 7600 block of Hammond Avenue as well. My
And
concern...
can you give us your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Paula Gaston. I just like rambling. But no, my concern is, as you all should be aware, traffic in Tacoma Park is horrendous. And due to the fact that that's a residential area, we have the cutoff street that the traffic cuts from New Hampshire Avenue into the residential zone, New Hampshire Gardens Estates, where I reside at. Merwood Avenue, I can't speak too much on that behalf for them, but I know as well that they have the cut-through traffic as well, too. And it's a lot of kids that live in that area. I have two sons myself, and they like to play basketball out front of my house where I have a court for them. But sometimes when they're out there, and I can't always be out there to watch them, I hear the cars. If I'm in my house, I hear them zooming through the streets. And I just, to make sure that no child get injured or further anything above that, as far as injured or killed, I just figured, I would petition to get some speed humps on that street as well. Because I know Wildwood has them, but not in the whole block of Wildwood Drive. But that area is really terrible as far as the cut through traffic.
Okay,
Do you
thanks.
live on one of these two streets?
I live on Hammond Avenue. Yeah, I live in the 7600 block. Yeah.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Would anybody else like to testify at the public hearing on speed humps? I imagine Chris Victoria does. Yes, we're in the public hearing. And you can speak at the podium, it's fine.
Good evening. I'm Chris Victoria, 1104 Merwood Drive. I'm here to speak in support of our petition for speed bumps on Merwood Drive. I guess there's some question about the need for perhaps having two humps as opposed to one hump. In justification for that, I'd like to present following items. First, at the end of Merwood Drive, there's the entrance to Becca Lilly Playground. And so, there's significant traffic, pedestrian traffic through the neighborhood from not just within our neighborhood, but also from the towers across New Hampshire Avenue. So it's a fairly well-used access to that parkland area. We get pretty high speeds coming down Merwood Drive, and in addition to that, on the street itself, I'd say there are approximately 12 to 18 or so kids under the age of 12 that regularly play on our street. And so the reason for asking for two bumps instead of one is that I'm sure you're familiar with this phenomenon of people, when they get near a speed bump, they tend to run up to it and then they run away from it, if you just have the one. The idea behind having two equally spaced bumps on the street would moderate those speeds so that people really couldn't build up ahead of speed beyond the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on our street. And again, given the fact that we do have this significant pedestrian attraction at the end of our street, plus the fact that we have all the children that live there, I think it justifies perhaps bending the standards a bit in order to install 2 humps. And I appreciate you entertaining our petition. Thanks very much for listening to what I have to say, and hopefully you'll vote to give us our speed bumps. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
James, 1103 Murraywood Drive, Chris's neighbor. Would like to second what Chris said. We definitely would like to have a speed hump on our street. I think also, like Chris, that 2 humps would be better than 1. I sound like Dr. Zeus when I say that. But the fact is, along with the points that Chris has made in favor of 2 versus 1 hump on our block, we have a block that is fairly long, and it curves and goes downhill towards Becca-Lilly Park. And really, you do have a blind spot. And so as you're driving in, especially from New Hampshire direction, where a lot of our traffic comes from, especially the traffic that's used to driving a little faster when it enters our neighborhood, you really cannot see to the end of the block. And so you slow down for the 1 hump in the middle, and you're off and running to the stop sign by Becca-Lilly Park. It would be great, given the number of kids who are playing in our neighborhood on a regular basis, to have 2 humps and guarantee the safety of the children in the neighborhood. I have to say, as parents, we've done a lot to try to counsel drivers as they drive through politely, and we have our little yellow men with their red flags telling people to slow down, but there's nothing like the official impact and effect of having humps in the street to tell people this is a place where you need to drive slowly. So like Chris, I appreciate you entertaining our petition. I hope you approve it for the 2 humps, and thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Sherry Rowe, and I'm the 1107 Murwood. And I would like to also support the humps. We also have another phenomenon that happens in our neighborhood is, I think it's the left turns. There's driving schools that come through our neighborhood all the time, and they're frequently going through. And sometimes they get a little speed, and sometimes that stop sign at the end of Murwood is a surprise to them because of the hump. So I think that for that, and also for all the kids, I think we have one family that has 9 kids who play in the street all the time. And it's a very child-friendly street. So if it would be very beneficial and for the safety of the children.
Good evening. I'm Terry De La Santa. I live at 7610 Hammond Avenue, and I'm speaking in favor of having the hump on Hammond Avenue because of trying to control the traffic in the neighborhood. And I want to speak to the appreciation to the city for providing a policeman to, I noticed the other night they were out there enforcing the one-way, which is the first time I've seen it in the whole time I lived there. And I really want to appreciate that and the city to improve our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. We will be discussing the speed humps on those 2 blocks and taking them up at first reading after we go through a couple of short items on the agenda. So if folks want to stick around, I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, and we should get there. Next item on the agenda is council comments. Just work down this way, starting with Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. I want to talk about 2 items tonight. These are items that I've actually raised before. The first is streetlights, a topic I've mentioned a number of times. I want to thank the city manager, Chief Rakucci, and Darrell Braithwaite for a renewed focus and effort on streetlights in the city. Thanks to their efforts, we've identified 7 additional streetlight outages in North Tacoma, and I know that we're pressing Pepco to resolve those issues quickly. I also want to thank Barb, the city manager, for making efforts to resolve the underlying structural problems with how Pepco handles our streetlight maintenance. The first is requesting a map from Pepco, which I think we're hopeful that they'll furnish for us, which would allow us to know where all the streetlights are in the city and the corresponding pole numbers, so we won't have to have residents out there with flashlights in the middle of the night in the dark trying to copy down pole numbers. And then the second is also discussing with them a more normal management feedback loop, so we'll know when lights are, have been repaired, and also start to discuss some agreed upon level of service. The second issue I want to mention, it has to do with this brochure and survey that was sent out through the newsletter to all the residents of Tacoma Park. I again want to make it clear that I did not see or review this brochure or survey before it went out. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know that there was going to be a survey given. And to the best of my knowledge, none of my council colleagues knew that either. Am I correct in that? My feeling about the survey is that it's poorly constructed. Some of the questions are confusing. It brings up items that the council has no power to comment or change, like recreation. It has the potential to be corrupted or co-opted because a few people could fill out many surveys. It's totally anonymous. You could go online and fill it out as many times as you want. And to my knowledge, there's no checking of IP addresses to know who's filled it out. It asks questions that we don't need answers to. Look at question 13. At least as a council member, I don't feel I need an answer to this question. Should the Tacoma Park City Council limit the position on the proposed development of the Tacoma Metro Station because the Metro Station is in the District of Columbia? I don't need an answer to that question. I'm respectful that my constituents might want to comment on that, but I feel pretty secure, based on a long history here in Tacoma Park, that if something affects the residents of this city, whether it's over in D.C., or if it's in Virginia, or if it's in Darfur, we're going to comment on it. So I don't know why all of a sudden we start to decide, well, we're going to restrict ourselves on what we're going to comment on because it happens to be just across the border in D.C. Many residents of my ward and many other wards in the city use that station very heavily, and so I don't understand why we would ask a question like that. Yes, council does want to hear people's opinion on this. And so what I would say is, come to the session on March 19th from 6 to 8:30 here at the community center and tell us what you want to hear. I would suggest that you not fill out the survey. I know that's a little bit confusing, but I think the survey is biased and asks poor questions. And so I don't think the information we're going to get from the survey is going to be very helpful in making the decisions that we need to make. If people can't come to the meeting, I'm sorry about that. You should call me or email me or any one of your council members or all of us and share your thoughts. And if the concern in doing the survey is that we're not going to hear enough from residents who are further away in Ward 5 or Ward 6, or residents who might have difficulty because of disabilities getting here, then we should employ the wonderful city bus that we've paid money for to go and help get those people. So those are my comments related to the survey. Again, I don't think that people should fill it out. Instead, I think they should come and have a discussion with their neighbors and with their council members. Thank you.
I'm going to limit my comment today to WSSC. So I was driving down to the council meeting. I saw again on Lincoln Avenue at Carroll Avenue that they have parked a big old piece of machinery right in the yellow zone just before Carroll Avenue. You must have seen it too. As somebody who is sometimes driving back and forth across there, when they do that, it creates an incredibly unsafe situation at that intersection because if a car is coming up or down Carroll and they want to turn onto Lincoln, it's not wide enough for two cars to pass, and so if somebody's there, they can't turn. And our drivers in Maryland are such that they go around the car that's trying to turn left, even if they have a turn signal on. They just like start zipping around them and claiming the lane. If you want to go across from Lincoln, which is already pretty deadly from people speeding both up and down the street, there's no safe space for you to go to on the other side, because as soon as you zip across, you actually have to zip into the oncoming traffic lane, which doesn't have that much visibility as you're coming up the hill. Now, I know that I've complained about this in the last 6 months because I remember them calling me back while I was at my new job and promising me that this would never happen again. And I talked to both the manager of all of this at WSSC and the guy who's the construction manager, and here we go again, incredibly unsafe. And I'm also really unhappy that they're using a residential lot at the corner of Ethan Allen and Jackson as a storage space, if that is in fact true. I haven't personally verified that, but it seems like the city's made some calls and code enforcement requests, and I would like to say that I very much appreciate the effort to get the county to engage on that effort. And I think in general, I'm really frustrated at how difficult it is to get the utility monopolies and other different governmental and quasi-governmental bodies to do their job. It's just really frustrating.
If I can just follow up on that for a second, I did come by that lot at the corner of Ethan Allen and Jackson today, and it is being used by the WSSC contractor who's doing the Carroll Avenue work.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one follow-up on Councilmember Wright's talk about the streetlights. Last week I had asked about why we don't participate in the same reporting system that the county has up, and I still look forward to finding out what the problem is that we as taxpayers of the county don't participate in that program, so that we don't have to build something new ourselves here in Tacoma Park at the expense of Tacoma Park residents. Along that same lines, as I recall, it wasn't too long ago that the county was offering trees for along streets, and Tacoma Park residents were excluded from that program. And I understand now, somebody told me this evening that there was an issue with money for rain gardens, that again, the city of Tacoma Park was excluded from that program. So I think this is an important item for us to get answers to, and I think it's over and above our work on the rebate issue that is ongoing. On a lighter note, after all the council comments so far, I would just like to thank everyone who put together the Ethiopian art exhibit and the reception that was here. On Saturday, it was a roaring success. I don't know, maybe the Gazette can tell us. I estimated 250 people here for the reception. It was great, and I think that the Art for the People, the Tacoma Park Community Action Group, and also the Arts and Humanities Commission are to be complimented for the great exhibit and the fantastic reception that we had on Saturday. Thank you.
Councilmember Robinson.
I'm also going to pile on to Josh's issue of streetlights here briefly, and hope that we can find which have the new bulbs that are more energy efficient and which streetlights have the old bulbs which are less energy efficient, and put that into the mix so that we can encourage Pepco to replace all of the old bulbs which are less energy efficient with the new bulbs which are more energy efficient.
I've got a couple of quick items. One is I wanted to remind my colleagues that we need to hear back from you about if there are any Thursdays in May that you can't do budget work sessions, because we need to get those on the schedule and line up staff, and need some lead time on doing that. So if you
I'm available every Thursday.
I also wanted to let folks know that today I got a call that was an official call, finally, from the Montgomery County Department of Public Works and Transportation liaison for the fire station construction, and they got the last hurdle out of the way today, and they're going to have a meeting very shortly with all of the folks involved, including a number of people from the city, to give out details on construction schedule and logistics. And I asked him if I would be accurate if I said that there would be work starting around April 1st, and that seems to be a good enough answer at this point. It's not exact, but finally, after 20 years of working to get a new fire station in Tacoma Park, the construction, the tearing down of the one adjacent house and the preparation of the part of the city lot for the temporary station should finally begin to happen in April. So prepare for more disruption. And it's to be an 18 to 24-month project.
Can I just make a comment or ask the city manager that as we get that information in about the details of the construction schedule, can we make sure to figure out a good way to share that with the residents right around the fire station? Maybe we could even do a page on the city website that kind of had all the documents in one place, and maybe even as the construction schedules change, people would know they could always go there and get information or something like that.
And I also just wanted to mention that I've been continuing to go to Annapolis to testify on various bills, and I will be testifying tomorrow for the city on the group of sanctuary and immigration bills in the House of Delegates. And then maybe the testimony schedule will start to wind down. So just want to let folks know that. The next item is additional agenda items and agenda scheduling update. Wanted to let folks know that, let's see, I would like to add an agenda item tonight. I thought we were going to have weekly legislative updates, and I just wanted to have a chance to touch base with the deputy city manager, who I assume will be here for the work session. So if we can just put a quick legislative update in as between items 6 and 7 on the agenda, that may only take a minute or two. And also, did the city manager wanted to get clarification from the council on whether we would televise the Metro event on the 19th and oh, and is it? Okay, so maybe we can also have a quick item just on that discussion, and we'll do that prior to the legislative update as part of the work session. And then just as far as update, I just wanted to let folks know that what I'd like to do is pull together a little bit of a Earth Day week, try and coordinate those events, and as part of that, have some items on the council agenda for us to take some actions for green efforts in honor of Earth Week. So if anybody has any particular items that you think would be applicable for that, please let me know. One of the ones that I'd like to put forward is the city having a resolution to join the Cool Capital Challenge, and I have one or two other ideas as well. So if council members or any members of the public have any ideas for particular actions that the council can take during Earth Week, please let me know. The next item is adoption of minutes. We're considering minutes for January 31st and February 4th. Would anybody like to move
I would like to move that.
Moved by Councilmember Siemens, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Is there any discussion?
Correction.
Substantive or editorial?
Well, it says I was absent on the 4th, but in fact, I have comments throughout it, so clearly I was not absent.
No comment. So noted. All those in favor of adoption of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And any editorial corrections? Get them to the clerk. Now we get to public comment period. If anybody would like to comment on any item that is not on our regular meeting agenda tonight, therefore anything that we're discussing in work session or anything that's not on the agenda at all, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and try and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. I'm Christine Simpson. I live on Cedar Avenue in Tacoma Park. And I wanted to talk about the Tacoma Metro issue that's come up and the survey that I also received in the mail. I guess it was this week. I have some of the concerns. I pretty much want to echo the words that Josh expressed. I received a call myself on the weekend of March 1st from a person by the name of Matt Larson, who I guess is a facilitator and has been hired by the city to run perhaps whatever facilitators do at this March 19th meeting. And also he told me that he had, that there would be a survey that was going to go out to the community about this issue. So I have, my interest in the Metro Development Project is pretty well known. I think I'm very interested in it. I was happy to receive the phone call, but I did become concerned when I realized that the survey had already been written by him with, I think, review by city staffers, and had already been sent to the printer with 13,000 copies probably stuffed at that point into the city newsletter. It wasn't exactly that I had anything that I feel like I should be consulted about all these Metro issues, but I did feel like it's a topic on which there are many strong feelings in the city of Tacoma Park, as I'm sure you know. And I think that I don't have any particular agenda on this, except that I really do feel like I want the citizens to know what's going on. And I feel like for this survey to have gotten to this stage in the planning of this meeting without anybody really knowing about it before the announcement is made is not really going about it the right way. And so I had a pretty candid conversation with Matt about that. He did seem quite uninformed about most of those feelings on the issue, and I told him that there was some complicated history here that led to some of the difficult feelings, and I thought they were not insurmountable, but it was going to take a good faith effort on the part of city staffers and the council to regain the trust so we can work together, I think, for our common goals here. Now that I've seen the survey, I do have a lot of the concerns that Councilmember Wright expressed. I do think it's confusing to answer. As I say, I feel like I'm kind of knowledgeable about a lot of the issues up there. A lot of my neighbors look to me to know what's going on this issue, and I wouldn't really know what to tell them about some of these questions. I don't know how to answer them. I also found there's a certain bias, I think, in some of these questions, particularly question 12. If you look at it, there's a ranking that you're supposed to make on which issues are more important than others, and some of those, honestly, I have never really considered to be major issues, at least in the discussions I've heard among many people in the city of Tacoma Park. So I do commend you for keeping the issue, on the front burner, and the staff too. I know it's hard to stay on top of the many things that you have to work on, but I do urge you to take greater oversight of the staff on this issue, and to please make sure that citizens like me and the others, some of us are in this room, and others may be watching, please try to keep us apprised, kind of ahead of the curve, so that we don't get taken by surprise, so we can all kind of work together on this. And when I say community, I do just want to point out that I mean both Maryland and D.C. residents were all affected by this development up there, and I think that the end result really needs to be something that we can all feel serves our common interests, both the Maryland people and the D.C. people. I know they appreciate the fact that we've given them a forum on many of the interests or many of the issues that are involved in this topic. The D.C. government doesn't listen to them much, and so I encourage us to allow them to participate as much as possible in our discussions on the issue. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name's Jim DeLuigi. I live on 13th Avenue, Tacoma Park, and also own a building on Grant Avenue. I've been in the city for 35 years, and I'd like to point out that what I've seen about the recent last 5 years is beginning to be a very serious disconnect amongst council, citizens who elect you, and city staff. I can point out a number of examples of this, but basically it boils down to, it seems like that city staff is running the city, not city council and the mayor. An example is what Councilman Wright talked about today, what you just heard about in this questionnaire that went out. Another example is this agenda item 7 that you're going to see tonight about this, many vague ideas. Another is the junction, where a letter was sent by city staff to state highways asking for a specific limited study with one solution in mind. That study did not address things that were brought to the council by myself in written form, has never been addressed and put forward as possible solutions, but instead it was a very narrow, focused thing. The letter was not copied to city manager. The letter was not copied to council. The letter was not copied to the mayor, but it was basically sent to the state saying what city council and mayor said should be done. I don't think that's appropriate. What's the purpose of city government? I've heard this said here before years ago, and people saying when things got to this extent that they are now, that it should be limited to safety and issues such as trash collection, issues such as was discussed by Councilman Wright with lighting, issues such as was discussed by Councilman Clay and WSSC, things that affect us every day. I think we need to relook at what's going on here with the city and the staff. I think we have a serious problem. We've had failures. The development of this particular building, this community center, was a failure. What's happening in Old Town downtown is a failure. We have empty stores because of the direction of not properly guiding developers through the development process. We have a failure at the junction as to what's going on right now. We have a failure at the metro site. I think you need to open your eyes, I think you look at what's going on and take control of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan Scribner, and I live on Willow Avenue. And I'd also like to talk about the metro development and the survey that was sent out. I've been pretty involved in this in the last couple of years, and so it was pretty. And I think the community has been turning out a lot over the last couple of years. Every time there's a city council meeting, people come out and let their voice be heard. Often there's 50 or more people who are trying to talk to you all about what they think was important, and advocating time and time again for the city council to be strong in opposition of the EYA plan and to work for the needs of transit at the city. So this survey was pretty frustrating to find. I got my newsletter and it wasn't in it, so I had to go to the website. So, there's always, that's just one of those little flaws that happen. But in going to the website, again, it just feels like the survey doesn't just take us back to square one, it takes us back to like 5 points below square one. It doesn't reflect anywhere about what the conversation's been to date going into this. And the questions it asks are quite vague. It asks about, on question 12, how that you could prioritize what you think is important, such as density, but it doesn't say, do you want high density or low density? It just says density. So in terms of you all getting any idea from the community on the response to that kind of question, it's just not going to give you anything. It's just a poorly worded survey. It asks about how much more would I be willing to pay in taxes, but I could say $5. I could, it's just not well worded to get specific information if you all are trying to get information beyond what you keep continually hearing from the community. I'm also distressed that it's both anonymous, and on the website version and on the paper version, you can send in as many as you want because it's anonymous. There's no way people could stuff the ballots with it. There's just no way of having any sense of control over what this is about. So in terms of a device, after all the expense that went through to get this out there, if you really did have questions that needed to be asked, I don't think this is going to get you the information that you may be seeking. So I'm distressed that it went to this far and was sent out and in this kind of shape. And it also, frankly, makes me a little nervous about the community meeting on the 19th, because it's kind of, you get a kind of lack of trust when a survey that's going to go into a meeting, then you start going, so what's the meeting going to be about? So I really ask you all to make sure that the meeting is a community meeting where people have a chance to talk, that if there's a report from it, that report is read by many people before it's sent out, because we've been done in by reports on community meetings around this issue before. So thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I didn't prepare any notes, so this will be really quick. My name is Elizabeth Wallace. I'm representing Look Up, the Storytelling Festival that we're going to have this summer in Tacoma Park, and I just wanted to thank everybody that has been helping getting a lot of the decisions rolling in the last month, including Mayor Williams, who spent an hour at least with me, and particularly Josh and Terry Siemens, who've been extremely helpful, and Barbara Matthews. And I just wanted to say that the response time of the city employees to the questions I have has, response time has decreased. Is that correct? Yeah, gotten better. And the response I have from the community is really positive, getting lots of volunteers and finding so many amateur astronomers in Tacoma Park you wouldn't believe. So I just want to say thank you for the support. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is Faith Wheeler. I'm not a citizen. I'm a resident of Tacoma Park, Maryland, but of Tacoma, D.C. I'm an advisory neighborhood commissioner whose single-member district is about 1/8 of a block from the metro property, in fact. So me and my constituents are very, very much affected by what happens eventually at that metro site and, of course, around it as well. I have learned about the survey and am concerned about what you would learn from the answers you might get. And I'm concerned about people's understanding of the questions. It's a very complex issue, as I'm sure you all are aware. And there are different interpretations of what things like environment means, what density means, high or low, what the impacts are for the community in terms of traffic congestion, in terms of the environment, in terms of, in fact, the use of public transportation itself. And there are very, very important questions that need to be very clear, clearly understood, and clearly interpreted. And I'm afraid that this survey will not accomplish that purpose for you. And so I'm really concerned and worried that of the use of it. I think I'll just leave it at that. Each issue is worthy of lengthy discussion and exchange of ideas and questions, but this is not the time for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sabrina Barron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma. I've been involved with the Metro site issue since 2000 personally, and my organization, my predecessor, as President Lorraine Pearsall, has been involved with this issue from the moment it became public knowledge. And I'm here this evening to echo the distress of Councilmember Wright and my neighbors and colleagues who have spoken this evening about the survey that went out in the newsletter. To my mind, a lot of the questions are what I would call leading questions. I think it's constructed to shape a particular response, and I find that even more distressful. We had made some progress, it seemed, on this issue. The city has put a lot of time and resources into this issue. But it's also been the experience in working over the years that we're constantly reinventing the wheel. It's always deja vu all over again. When it seems like we've finally gotten some firm ground under our feet with this issue, then something like this survey comes along to, as Megan pointed out, put us back further beyond square one. Somebody who is either completely uninformed or terribly misinformed involved in writing the survey, clearly not having any engagement with the issue, not knowing anything about the history, the development, the unfolding of this issue. It's extremely distressing and it's extremely frustrating. I hope all of you will join Councilmember Wright in his distress about this survey and with all the concerns that have been expressed about the potential to pack this survey for anybody from anywhere to respond to this survey. I hope that the council will see its way to make sure that any results from this survey are disregarded. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Elaine Pearsall. I'm with Historic Tacoma. You know, I'm going to comment that I would really like to see the city manager's comments come before public comment period, because it's dismayed me many times that we don't have a chance to respond to Barb's reactions to things, and this is one of those times. How could you do this? I was so shocked to see this. I am embarrassed, and I am so ashamed of you for not controlling this. It is so biased. It is so badly done. How very nice of staff to include a picture of Ike Leggett smiling right beside the EYA project as though he's endorsing it, which he is not. How could you let this happen? How much money did we spend on this while the city is asking whether we want to spend tax money on this? It is an unbelievable piece of horse patootie, is all I can say. I do not understand how you could have let this happen. And frankly, I would like to have some clarification from the city manager and from all of you as to whether or not you knew this was happening, and you, how on earth, who is in charge here? Who? You were so strong at the compact hearing. We were so proud of you. You stood there shoulder to shoulder, and then you put this out. Did you read this? It is deceptive. It is biased. It is leading. And it is not worthy of you. It is not worthy of your citizens. And this should not be counted. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Sarah Green. I'm the elected official in the District of Columbia, ANC 4B01, whose single-member district includes the metro station. Anticlimactic to follow up Lorraine Pearsall's statement, which reflects exactly the way I feel and I think was incredibly powerful and well done. Just to say, I agree with her completely. I, too, as a longtime neighbor, having lived in Tacoma, D.C. for 30-something years, was incredibly proud to stand with all of you at the hearing, the recent WMATA board meeting, and also last year at the compact hearing. I thought the city's presentation was the height of professionalism at that compact hearing. I thought the performance, the city, I was very proud to be your neighbor in that WMATA boardroom. I thought all the statements, I just thought it was a class act all the way. And that's why, and I was proud of you. I mean, win, lose, or draw. I thought, okay, City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, they know how to do it. Thank you very much. And when I saw that survey and hers, I said, wait a minute. you guys are what? You're throwing in the towel? Why? Why? You know, Fat Lady ain't sung yet. We got a long ways to go on this. I'm not giving up, and I surely hope you are not. And I'm sorry you're sending out the message, because I'm telling people in D.C., we're going strong. No reason to give up. So I'm asking you, please do not give up. Please see this through, and please just go back and do things right as you were before. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. City manager would like to make a few comments.
Just 3 items this evening. I think last week's meeting, Councilmember Wright had asked for some additional information about the March 19th public session on the Metro issue that was sent to the council via email. So I won't reiterate that. I would just comment, as I was indicated in that email from the facilitator, Matt Larson, to the council, the survey questions that he developed. And I would certainly share the concerns that have been expressed here tonight with Mr. Larson. But he did conduct a series of confidential interviews with the city council members, each of them individually, myself, City Attorney Sue Silber, and Deputy City Manager Suzanne Ludlow. He had actually recommended the survey and drafted the questions based on those interviews with the 10 of us, I believe. But I will make sure that he hears the comments this evening that the council has expressed concern about, as well as members of the public. 2 other very quick items. I think at last week's meeting, a city resident, Marty Ittner, appeared before the council regarding Brashears Run. At your places at the dais this evening is a report prepared by the city's engineer, Ali Khalilian, with some information about testing on water quality along Sligo Creek, including Brashears Run. If the council would like a more detailed discussion of this, I'm sure the mayor could schedule a work session at some future date. But I did just want to share with the council that that report has been distributed. The last item is to share with the council and the community that earlier today we did receive in the mail notification that our second application for funding through the Safe Routes to School program has been approved. The city will be receiving next fiscal year approximately $128,000 in funding through that program. The purposes are basically for continued encouragement and education relative to walking to school, as well as one infrastructure component, which is basically funding for a missing sidewalk study and installment. I would mention, especially for Councilmember Wright's benefit, we did once again try to get funding for the sidewalk along Piney Branch Road, and that application was denied. I did want to share that with you. That's it.
I'd just like to add a few comments on the Metro survey that a number of people commented on. I'd just like to reiterate that this was the survey done by the consultant based on what he thought would be helpful for the 19th. That is not anything that the council had any input on or knew was going to be coming. I would also say that I understand the need to get more information from more people who haven't been as closely involved with the issue as a number of the people here tonight who spoke about their concerns. I would say that the session on the 19th was meant to gather input from people who have been involved and people who haven't been as closely involved. The results of the survey aren't anything that the council has to, it's like if the people want to kind of pack the results, that isn't necessarily going to tell us anything one way or the other. I think it's going to be up to the council to have the conversation with the people who come to talk about where we go next, and I think that's what that session is supposed to be for. So I look forward to that session on the 19th, and I think we made a lot of progress on that issue, and this was our idea to come back around and get input from folks and try and go forward, and I hope we can do that. Terry and then Josh.
Thank you, Mayor. Barb, I really appreciate the rapid response and reaction on the Brashears Run question. I'm afraid that my expertise is not sufficient to understand the report that we've received. So I think we either need to have a presentation by the city engineer, or if you would prefer, or the rest of the council would prefer, I could handle it with separate correspondence with him. So, what's your druthers, Mayor?
Sorry, I was talking with the,
I'm saying I don't think this report by itself gives us a whole lot of information. It doesn't give me enough information without being a water quality engineer. It has some measurements. It has an orange bar, but doesn't say why some of the measurements are on the orange bar. It talks about test values in comparison to Sligo Creek maximum levels, but I'm not sure whether it's good or bad.
maybe if we can get some further information from the city engineer, and then after we get that, then we'll decide whether we need a work session.
Thank you.
Sorry to hear that we didn't get funding for the Piney Branch sidewalk. I think we need to, this is the second time we've been turned down, if I'm correct, right? So I think we need to rethink our strategy on this, and I know that Jamie Raskin and Heather Mazur, and I'm sure Tom Hucker and Sheila Hickson would also be willing to go to bat for us on this. And I don't think I know in talking to Jamie and Heather at least, we've succinctly asked what we, and clearly articulated what we want so that they know it also from the State Highway Authority and the state to have the funding to do that, as well as what we need to do to rectify the situation at Chicago and Philadelphia and the situation at Piney Branch in Philadelphia. And I think that they're basic, in my conversation with them, they're waiting for us to articulate to them what we want them to advocate for, and they're ready to go and advocate and go to bat. So I look forward to working with you on that part.
The last, the last information I had was we have been in communication with Daryl Mobley, who is the district engineer for this SHA district. He did indicate that they are exploring other funding options. I sent him an email sometime in the last 2 weeks, Councilmember Wright, asking kind of where he was in that process. I have yet to hear back from him, but I do plan to follow up. But I do know that he is actively looking for funding sources.
Okay, well, I think if we can enlist those other state electeds in that process, it'll be helpful. Just to be clear about the session that's coming up on the 19th, I did get the email about what was going to happen in that session, and I still find it a little bit vague. And excuse me if I am feeling a little bit of lack of trust at this moment, but given that the survey went out and I never saw it or knew that a survey was even going to go out, I think Mayor Williams was sort of kind in his portrayal of the situation. We didn't even know that a survey was planned, but I would like very detailed specifics about what's going to happen in that meeting. I want to know minute by minute what the sessions are going to be, what the questions are going to be asked. Are we going to have a picture of Ike Leggett standing next to a brochure for people to look, next to the plan for people to look at? So I want to know exactly what's going to be presented, what the handouts are going to be, what's going to be on the walls. And I do not think that we should be pushing people to fill out the survey during that session.
Okay. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Recreation Committee interviews. If Dallas Bertraw, Tim Dowd, Jane Hurst, and Ray Scannell are here.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Bruce is taking a few minutes out in the corridor, so I will lead in the conducting of the interviews tonight. And maybe we could start with Dallas and get a sense of why you are interested in joining this committee.
Sure. I live on Birch Avenue, and I've lived in the city for 18 years. I've been involved in youth sports a lot, but my interests in the Recreation Committee go much beyond that. My perspective is especially oriented towards recreation programs that serve a diverse age range, from very young to what one day aspire to be the very old, and to take advantage of this new building fully for the kinds of activities that can be planned. And I'm especially interested in seeing city recreation programs that can supplement what I see as sort of a gaping and growing hole in terms of the kinds of education around physical activity and other types of recreation, including theater, dance, and the arts, music, that is emerging in our educational system and in our social lives in general. And finally, I also am interested in seeing recreation programs that can encourage broad volunteer participation.
All right, thank you. Questions for Dallas?
No, but I would point out that we do have 4 names on our list and 5 candidates in front of us. Karen. Okay, I think it's great that you're here to interview. I know that that you've participated with the rec committee in the past, and I hope that we can make this her official interview, and we can follow up with the paperwork later. Is that
right?
Okay.
We'll gladly take your resume and application, City Clerk. We not have it in our packet tonight.
Okay.
Great.
About dates, but
All right.
we'll provide that information.
All right, we'll look forward to that, and we will ask you the same question. Tim?
That's me.
How are you tonight?
Fine. How are you?
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. My name's Tim Dowd. I live on Hickory Avenue in Tacoma Park. I've lived there since '99. I've been involved in recreation in the city through soccer, being a coach, as well as working as a division coordinator for some time. I've been on the recreation ad hoc committee, I guess, for about 4 years, and I feel that the recreation department, because it's one of the primary avenues that residents of the city interface with the city. It seems like the other avenue would be through Public Works, but one of the primary avenues would be through the Recreation Department, that it's really crucial that we try to have a good interface with the community through the Recreation Department. And I would echo the things that Dallas said, that should be through a diverse age range. It should be with young children and encouraging athletic behavior, athletic activities, as well as with older people in the community. But it should also be across a diverse socioeconomic group. And I think that there are things that we can do as a committee to encourage that the department does a good job of reaching out to all of those different diverse groups. And I guess that's what interests me about being on the committee.
Excellent. Thank you for those thoughts. Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Hurst. Oh my gosh, he's my councilman. I live on Spruce Avenue. I got drafted by Howard into this committee
Surprise,
like the rest of us. But I'm not really a sports person. I'm more of an arts person, and especially music. So I'm one of those people who wants to make sure that this new stage is going to be used every night that it can be when it gets built. And I really think we're happily on the same page so far. I'd love to see more citizen involvement in rec programs, and I've kind of brainstormed. It'd be fun to have a speakers series. We have so much expertise in our community. We ought to have at least once a month somebody from the community, you know, having an evening salon with somebody who can bring their expertise to share. I would like to see community sing, which I'm going to volunteer to organize, but have to wait for a job thing to get a little easier. But that's in the works, which is just pretty much anybody who wants to come sing. It doesn't matter if you can actually sing or not. It's really open to all. And I also
you haven't
like
heard me.
Yeah, we can try you out. just sit there and we'll all sing loudly. And I would like to see different ages involved. I'd love to see things like some of the older folks teaching some of the younger folks. So some of our seniors may be working in after-school programs, things like that. I think it'd be terrific. So the citizen involvement thing, I think, is important to me.
All right, thank you very much. And Raymond Scannell?
Yes. That's me, Raymond Scannell. I've been a resident, I live at Pond Park Avenue, and I've been a resident of Tacoma Park for almost 22 years, which has gone by rather quickly. When I first moved to Tacoma Park, I was a relatively young dad with a couple of toddlers, and I was really interested and concerned about the recreational activities available for young kids. And then as the years passed, and we ran into some difficulties with things, I became involved. My wife was president of the Friends of the Library, and Terry Seaman and I met, I think, on a demonstration in front of the library, because I was concerned that a city like Tacoma Park should be a provider of services not just for those who are capable, the affluent who are capable of, if they really want to, of getting their own services, but also a provider of services for kids and community members who don't otherwise have the opportunity to take advantage of those services. And the library, to me, was the first example of that, because it's walking distance to everybody in town, pretty much, in the main part of town. And not too long after that, I became involved with the program committee for the original community center committee, because I was concerned about, at this point, it was about 10 years ago, and my kids were now getting into middle school, later elementary school, and they were part of a huge wave of children that was coming up, and that was underserved by the facilities that we had available in town. And I emphasized that we had available in town because they're sitting here. And some of you may have heard me rant and rave about the Imperial Control Board before. We had these facilities in town that we couldn't access, and there were limitations that were placed on the opportunities for recreation that kids and adults had because we couldn't access those facilities. And so one of the things I would like to do is go back to some of the things that we found in the program committee about, as was mentioned, diverse opportunities for different age groups, different constituencies. We talked about the arts. We talked about the theater. We talked about music programs. We talked about athletic programs. I'm a former commissioner of Tacoma Park Babe Ruth Baseball. So, I know a little about running an athletic program, but it's that plus. And we have a lot of different constituencies that need services because they can't haul themselves off to Rockville or to West County, where the county puts on all its programs. And then finally, so here I am, and I'm now eligible for AARP membership, which is a little distressing. But so I'm interested in seeing that the city begin to address the issues of a rising wave of senior citizens. Again, with who will have mobility issues. And, when we, in the period where we're starting to think about our global, our carbon footprint in the global scheme of things, having local services and having a local recreation program that can address the concerns and the needs of senior citizens as well as young people is what I really think it would be a contribution that our city could make that would be worthwhile. So I guess I'm bringing with you 22 years of experience running programs, having my kids in programs, and I'm very interested in pursuing further the private-public partnership idea. We've done it with Babe Ruth League, the soccer league does it. I was an indoor soccer coach, which is how I came to loathe the Imperial Control Board. And I see ways that we can work more constructively with other organizations in the community to expand the kinds of recreational opportunities that we can make available. So that's what I'd like to do.
Well, thanks, and it sounds like we'll be soon serving your grandchildren on the theme of your own aging.
Not in, please, no. Not yet. Biologically, yes.
Okay. And Karen, good to
Yes.
see you again. And
I'm Karen Mendez. I live on, wow, the speaker is really good, isn't it? I live on Kennebec Avenue, and I've lived in Tacoma Park, I guess 30 years already now. Time does go by fast. And I was recruited by Howard, and I've been working on the committee unofficially, well, the unofficial committee for 3 or 4 years, and I'd just like to see some of the things through that we've started, getting the programs up and running. I am big on sports, but I'm also big on dance, so I have an interest in seeing this room completed. And also, I kind of feel that it's my job to represent the diversity in this community, because we don't see it on the committees a lot of times, ethnically or financially, I guess that's.
We have a senior on this committee.
I'm a senior, I'm a female, I'm right. So I appreciate you letting me get my interview over with
all right,
tonight.
wonderful. And how many openings do we have? Vacancies do we have?
We have 15? How many so far?
We haven't filled any, just the interviews.
10 interviews. All right, well, so your chances are good, and a very distinguished group. Any comments or questions?
Comments, just great, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say thank you in particular to Jane and Ray and Dallas from my ward. I appreciate that. And I think, I mean, all the people I've seen come forward and who are either already involved with the ad hoc recreation committee or want to be in the official recreation committee, I think is very impressive. And I think when we really coalesce and get that going, it's going to do amazing things for recreation in the city. So thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you. You'll hear from us shortly.
Thank you.
All right, well, since the mayor seems to have taken his leave, why don't we take a break, and we'll be back shortly.
I like you as leading the meetings.
I didn't know what to do. No script. What to tell me.
Karen has called me twice. And I've got her down to call me once. You're on the-
Okay, we're now in our regular meeting, and the next agenda item is first reading of ordinance authorizing installation of speed humps in the 7600 block of Hammond Avenue. Would somebody like to introduce that ordinance?
Yes, I will move it. Second.
Oh, there was a tie on the second. The clerk gets to pick the second between Councilmember Wright and Councilmember Snipper. I have no idea. Any discussion on the ordinance?
That's why there's no discussion.
Well, then that would be tough to do.
Are there copies over there?
Oh, well then. Never mind. Would you like to, I don't know, table that till next week?
Table till next week until we have that ordinance to look at?
Yes. Okay.
I would accept that.
And we do, but is there any timeliness to this issue? All right, table it for 2 weeks? All right.
And that'll be both of them.
Right.
Well, we haven't taken up the second one. So all those in favor of tabling for 2 weeks the first reading ordinance on Hammond, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that was tabled till 2 weeks. We will also take up the next item in 2 weeks as well. So we now have the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for community health needs focus groups and survey. And Ms. George is here. You want to give some recap on this?
Well, good evening, Council. It's Benita George, and I'm here as the staff liaison for the Health Services Impact Committee. And we met with you all last week, and after interviewing 3 of the vendors that had expressed an interest in conducting the health needs assessment with focus groups, we did make a selection, and we identified the Riviera Group, and we have the ordinance here. I'm requesting that Council adopt the ordinance so that we can move forward, and the city manager is given the permission to negotiate the contract with the group. They're eager to get started as well.
Okay. Somebody want to move the ordinance? Second. Okay, moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Any discussion? Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I want reassurance that just because WA is paying half of it, they won't have any, they won't be contributing bias to the results.
The group, as you are probably familiar with, Councilmember Snipper, is very committed to identifying the needs of the citizens and not the needs of Washington Adventist Hospital. The idea is that the questions that will be generated in the focus group discussions will also be similar to the questions that are on a survey that we've worked on. Now, in addition to that, the Riviera Group will be taking a look at this survey that will be sent to the residents electronically, to the various neighborhood associations, to make sure that the questions are sound and reasonable and get to the point of our purpose of the committee. The Riviera Group will administer the electronic survey and also collect the data, and then the members will work together to analyze that data they collect.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
Aye.
Councilmember Barry.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Snipper.
Aye.
Councilmember Ray.
Aye. Okay, that ordinance passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, if we can have a short discussion about whether we, I guess it's two questions, both involving televising various things that the council does. The question came up about whether we wanted to televise the March 19th Metro meeting that we have here, and the question also came up about televising the Azalea Awards?
No, the issue with the Azalea Awards is whether the council wanted to waive any associated rental fees at the community center and any additional staffing.
Okay, sorry. Somehow I was trying to conflate those. So then, first item is on the televising the Metro Development meeting on the 19th. Councilmember Wright and I had both had the thought that that isn't something that we necessarily needed to televise, that I guess I kind of see it in some ways as a number of potential meetings that we might have on a number of issues where we want to get input from residents, and I don't necessarily think of them as like council meetings, or we would do them in council meetings. And so I think we could have maybe better back and forth with residents and try and get information from them and give them information on these types of issues if it's not televised. Nobody said we have to televise everything we do. Feelings about that? Yeah.
Well, I expected Terry to, Councilmember Siemens to jump in on there, but I will. I think that your point is quite valid, that people may speak more freely if it's not televised. On the other hand, one of the functions of this is to inform people in Tacoma Park. I had a conversation just this evening with someone who was not very well informed and was appreciative of receiving the brochure because it did have some information in it. So I think there are still folks who will appreciate it being televised. And barring some... The other thing about not having it televised is there could easily be other folks there who would watch it on television, or if they found out it wasn't on television, would come and watch it in person. I don't know if we're keeping it hidden or whatever. I don't see the hidden part, I guess. Maybe you'd have to say more to convince me.
I didn't say anything about it.
No, you didn't. I'm putting words in your mouth,
oh, thanks.
Mayor. But that's where you were going. Why wouldn't you televise it if there were cost money? I suppose there's that.
That wasn't the concern.
Okay.
I guess I'd turn it around and say, what do we want to televise above these meetings? And it seems like we'd want to televise things that are of particular interest, or where there's a need to educate people, or have them see the variety of opinions. So, off the top of my head, this seems like a good example, or a good contender for that. I guess I haven't been privy to a discussion of why we wouldn't televise things or why we would not. So I'm a little unclear.
We haven't necessarily had that conversation.
All right. So clarify, if you would clarify why you thought maybe this wasn't a good candidate. Could you reiterate that?
Maybe I'll turn to Councilmember Wright. He and I had that conversation.
Sure. I think there's a number of reasons why. One of them is that this is, at least in my mind, more of a community discussion. It's not a set of people up at the front of the room that are easily viewed and recorded. So one thing is that it's going to be a free-flowing discussion, which I think is going to be difficult to televise. The second is I think there are times when, as a community, it is a public meeting, and anyone should come who wants to, and I assume there'll probably be minutes associated with the public meeting. But I think there's also times when, as a community, we're going to maybe not argue, but discuss in a heated way, have disagreement. And I'm not so sure that we always want that to be something that is televised to people broadly outside the community. And in this case in particular, I think it's an issue where we want to discuss it as a community and then come to some agreement about how we're going to proceed. And there might be even comments about thoughts around legal issues or legal strategies, which I don't necessarily think we want to have totally broadcast verbatim, word for word on television. That being said, I generally am in favor of having public meetings televised. So,
Councilmember Clay.
I would have to agree that it wouldn't be appropriate to televise this meeting. I think it's, I agree with everything that you said. And I also think that there are other times where we have things in between a regular televised council meeting and, a private closed session. And this is in between that. And I think part of what puts it in between that is to allow people to come and participate freely. It's not the same as a council meeting where people are expected to make comments for the public record and to be recorded in that same kind of public way as they are when they're sharing with in a discussion. And so that's why I would support having the meeting not be televised. As somebody who recently has had the experience of having people take small pieces of things that you say out of context and blow them up repeatedly, I could see how that would be a fear that people would have about something they might say in the meeting, or they're talking about something and they're talking it through essentially as they're having the discussion, and you don't want that to be on the evening news.
Councilmember Snipper and then Councilmember Berry.
I would join those that are supporting the televising of the meeting for a couple of reasons. One, there has been, as we've heard tonight, allegations of miscommunication and non-communication, and therefore I think the more communication we can generate, whether it be by television, press, or face-to-face, I think given the intense interest in the community in this issue, the more communication the better. As far as the argument that people will be somehow restrained in saying and speaking their piece if the television cameras are present, that certainly didn't prevent anyone tonight speaking fully, openly, and quite critically of the city employees, city staff, and the council. So I don't for a minute think that the presence of cameras is suddenly going to turn people into wallflowers who are unwilling to speak their piece. Thirdly, this issue has had a history of substantial coverage on the part of the city and the local media in general. This goes back to the compact hearing, the hearing in the church a year ago last fall. It was mentioned tonight. That was televised, and therefore I would think that this meeting is every bit as important as some of those others have been. So for those reasons, I think we should go ahead and televise it.
Councilmember Snipper.
Yes, I knew that Councilmember Berry would be more articulate about this than I, but I agree with him. I do think that reporters will be present. We have no way of excluding folks from any of the interested parties, or even tangentially interested parties, from attending or participating. So I think all that would be accomplished by not televising it would be to raise an issue, why are we not televising it? And we seem to televise everything else, and also that it would inhibit folks who, for whatever reason, can't come from hearing at least what's going on.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor. As people probably know by now, I tend to err on the side of transparency, and I think meetings should be open to the greatest extent possible, and the dissemination of the information, or in this case, the televising of the meetings is preferable. But I think cost can also be an influencing factor here, and I wonder, Barb, do you have an estimate of what it would cost to do this? I mean, it would be...
I don't have a dollar figure. It would be comparable to the staff that is here to televise council meetings. Obviously, there's a sound engineer at the back of the room now, and there's usually 2 members of the communication staff upstairs that are basically manning camera angles and things of that. Suzanne, do you have any? It'd probably be probably $200 would be my guess. I'm not sure.
Ask for a raise. Thank you.
He's very cost effective.
The last time I participated in a meeting where the same facilitator, it was the gymnasium, we were over at the church, I think, over on the other side of New Hampshire Avenue. The folks walked around, the camera people walked around with cameras, taking pictures of folks who were having conversations, just like 2 people having conversations while they looked at the mock-ups of the potential gym solutions. And I guess that's the part that I don't think we necessarily have to televise, people's little conversations that they're having like that while we have free-floating cameras going around. So maybe we could have a situation where we record and televise the presentation portions of it, and maybe some other components, but not these more like if we had small group discussions, or had people floating around televising people's little conversations that they have. Because I would agree with the argument about as much transparency in the things that happen. Just they're kind of 2 different things to me. There's the presentation, and then there's people's little conversations that they have about it.
If I might, so the agenda for the evening, as we talked about last week, is there's the first half hour of wandering around, and I wouldn't anticipate that would be taped, but your direction's important. But the bulk of the meeting, there would be a presentation, then there's questions and answers for facts, and then there's an opportunity for people to speak for 3 minutes each. And that in particular, the presentation and the clarifying questions and the opportunity for people to kind of say their thoughts after all that was the heart of the meeting. And that's how Mr. Larson had in mind, and we described last week, and that's why it would be taped. That's why we had anticipated it would be taped, because it's very similar to that kind of thing we've done before like that.
So
when people make their 3 minutes, do they just get to talk once, and then once we've gone through all the people, then we're done, or will people be allowed to read? Because usually in a discussion, there's like a back and forth and that sort of thing.
That's something we can go back with Mr. Larson about, but his anticipation is there would be an opportunity for them to say things, and then if there was additional time that people could, kind of go back for the minute, the type of thing that we've done in more traditional hearings. He did not have it designed as a back and forth, around the table kind of a discussion.
Last time when we did that at the gymnasium presentation, people would ask questions, and he mostly couldn't answer them, and so then it relied on, because it was gymnasium, it pretty much relied on city staff. But I imagine that if it's a question and answer session like that, instead of a discussion about what people want to see come out of it, that the same thing's going to happen again. And I didn't think that worked very well last time. So people asked questions, and then nobody was really prepared with answers. So I don't see how this can be very functional. I think it would be better to have the discussion unless the various players who would be holding the information about which people would be asking questions were available to answer the questions. And this is so much more complex than the gymnasium. If we didn't get it there, I don't know how we're going to get it here because it involves all these people we don't control.
On this one, I guess the discussion that Mr. Larson had was that a lot of times just kind of understanding what the development review processes are, requires a little bit of clarification on how that goes, and I think that's what he was envisioning. But if it's something that you want us to go back around and have, Mr. Larson discuss this with you, that's fine, but that's what he had envisioned as the agenda.
Does he know anything about the development review process?
Yes. They've worked with a number of different land use, kind of controversial land use processes in the area over time. That's one of their specialties.
This is really specific and unique, though.
Yes, and I'm certain he doesn't know every detail about the Tacoma Metro project.
Yeah.
But for how you go, the DC Zoning Commission and that kind of thing, that would be kind of the facts of what, if somebody asks, at what point could the city weigh in, there could be some information about that, if that was the topic at the time.
Has he have we talked to Harriet Tregoning to know exactly how they're going to deal with this situation? Because in the meeting that Bruce and I were together in Papari and Tregoning, there was talk about, well, could they do the process faster? And she said, well, maybe we could speed it up. So, what does he know exactly what's going to happen in the DC process?
No. And I don't know that they do, but they do have a standard process to go forward. That's something that we'll make sure that we have the most up-to-date information about that they expect, that the Office of Planning expects through the Zoning Commission and the Historic Preservation Board. And so those are that's the detailed type of information. Now, in terms of back and forth with Harriet Tregoning and that kind of thing, I would not see that that's kind of a discussion point. I think that's something more that the council would be involved in at a later point, but that's just my guess at that.
I think I want to say at this point we're getting fairly deep into this, and this was a conversation about whether to televise or not, and I'd like to keep it at that and keep moving. I think this has stimulated other questions that we have, and I would encourage us to continue talking with staff. What it brings to my mind is exactly what is it that we're trying to get out of the 19th. And I think we need to continue to have that conversation so that we're clear on what it is that we want, so that we get it, rather than getting to the end of the 19th and going, well, now what? So any other quick comments, and then we'll make our decision and move on.
I agree that we should continue to talk about the television issue, but the 19th is a week and a half away.
I know.
And I find it hard for us as a council to have discussions about that by email or somehow. I mean, you can't do it as a group outside this room, so sometimes they happen in email, or you have one-off discussions with city staff, and I think that can lead to a lot of confusion. So I'm not so sure how we're going to resolve what exactly is going to happen on the 19th if we don't either resolve it tonight or resolve it on the 17th. That seems pretty close on the 17th. So,
Councilmember Siemens and then Councilmember Rounds.
I just wanted to thank you, Mayor, because I was becoming growing concern that we were conducting something that wasn't very transparent, because it hadn't been announced to be in discussion on the agenda, and that we were going way out of bounds, and I appreciate your catching that.
I guess I wonder broadly where we are. We have a lot of citizen input on ideas for the metro, and then there's been city input on ideas for the metro, and there's a certain tension point there. So I wouldn't be surprised if on that night that tension point comes to the surface. I just throw that out there as a kind of background from my own perspective as much as anything else.
Okay.
Is that the guidance you need, Barb?
I think I will ask for a quick little straw vote here. I think I have a sense of where this is, but all those who would like the 19th to be televised, kind of wave a little hand there, and that's a majority. So it will be televised. And we can. And now the question about the Azalea Awards, Barb, was. No, we'll do that one right now. No.
It was just a very, I think I already know the decision point. I just thought it should be done publicly, as there was a request that basically we allow the Tacoma Foundation to use the community center. I apologize, I don't recall the date. For the Azalea Awards. Thank you. For the Azalea Awards, I think there had been a request that the city waive any type of room rental fees and any type of additional staffing costs, because I think if I recall, the event goes into the evening when the center is usually closed, so we will be paying staff beyond what we customarily do.
Right. It's proposed to be from 6 to 8 on a Saturday.
Right. I guess all I need at this point is just some direction from the council in terms of honoring that request, and then I would just suggest at some future date, as the agenda permits, the council may just want to have a broader discussion, under what circumstances should those be waived, just so staff has a better feel for how to handle such requests in the future.
Yeah, I think this is a very valid request. This is all about the kinds of things that the council wants to do. The council can sponsor it, but I think it's fine to do it, and I think we can have that broader discussion at another time about what types of things we want to see fall under that same category. So I see all nodding heads yes. So that one's done. And then Suzanne, I just wanted to do a quick legislative update.
Yes, I'm here for that.
My sense had been that we wanted to just have the opportunity to have these while the legislature is in session so that we could catch up on anything we need to. I noticed that there were, I want to say 4 things on the agenda for tomorrow in Annapolis, and we took positions opposing House Bill 735 and 885, which are generally about sanctuary laws and prohibiting sanctuary laws. We didn't discuss 1232, which is the Citizen Rights Act, or 921, which is unauthorized signs on rights-of-way, and I didn't know whether we needed to do anything, take a position on those, leave them alone. It's our last opportunity to do anything if we wanted to, and then there's also the following day on English language as the official language of Maryland. I guess I feel like we can leave that one alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that frankly the 3 big bills tomorrow are the ones that you'll be testifying on, provided the council takes a position on 1232. The 885 and 735 were discussed before, which was protecting the sanctuary role of Tacoma Park's role as a sanctuary city. One of the things I guess I want to go back over and just mention that the testimony before on one of the partner bills of this, of 735, was apparently very effective, well received by a variety of people, and so it's likely that the companion bill will not move forward. It's not taken off the list yet, although I'd heard that it has been, but I've not seen it on the computer as taken off yet, so they will have their partner bill heard tomorrow, 735. And in that one also MML agreed to go along with that, and that I think made it very strong. The bill that I found particularly fascinating is the Citizens Rights Act, and if I could go over it for just a moment, I think it's, the more I read it, the more I'm amazed about it.
And I figured it would be helpful that if I'm going to say anything about it tomorrow,
that you know what it is.
That folks here at least know, and if we want to take a position, do that so that I can convey that and not just say, well, I think we're against this.
Right. I guess on this one, I wouldn't hesitate on saying that the city is against it because it does go against a number of things we've been for a long time. But let me go through what the bill incorporates. It's extreme legislation. Really is quite remarkable and broadly written. It allows private citizens to sue state and local officials for taking any action that conflicts with federal immigration law, despite the fact that federal immigration law is a huge body of law subject to multiple interpretations. It allows private citizens to sue state and local officials for allowing non-citizens to vote, as they do legally in Tacoma Park. It allows private citizens to sue state and local officials for infringing on the privileges and immunities of another U.S. citizen residing in Maryland. Generally, you have to have a personal injury to sue against somebody, and you can just pick somebody and pick something and sue them. It allows state judges to suspend and terminate local government employees and not go through the local government employees' rights and processes that a local government sets up. And the impact of all of these things would be that it would inundate Maryland with lawsuits. And the whole intent of this is to do anything against illegal aliens and anyone who would help them. But it's written much more broadly than that. It's not well written in the first place. And so it's kind of ridiculous legislation. Nevertheless, because it has so many impacts against municipal governments and you and city staff, that anybody could sue us and that it could actually take it to a judge to suspend us or terminate us is really quite remarkable. So in looking at this, it is against many of the things Tacoma Park is for. We have non-citizen voting in local elections. We follow ethical procedures about disciplining employees, and we do want to uphold laws that would allow somebody who's being personally injured to sue, as opposed to just somebody who just thinks that they should sue to sue. Those are the items in 1232.
Councilmember Clay and Councilmember Snipper, and let's not linger too long on this.
So I regret that I don't know the answer to this question, but are we talking about structurally constitutional amendments or passing laws? Because it seems like
Yes, it does.
that wouldn't gel with the whole, I mean, I haven't read the state constitution recently, although I did when I got elected, but I can't imagine that would conflict.
Yes.
So how does that work? Somebody sues and then it gets struck down by the state? I don't get it.
I will say that in discussing this, let me go back. One of the things that we do when it's this kind of a bill is we have our city attorney look at it. And after talking with her and after she went through and looked at this with her staff, we decided not to give a detailed legal list on this because, first of all, it's very poorly written, so that would take an enormous amount of time. And second, we didn't want to help anybody fix it either. And so I will just say that it's their impression and judgment that this has many legal flaws. Thank you.
What's the number?
It's House Bill 1232, the Citizens' Rights Act.
Councilmember Snipper.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Clay. The last time I checked, we hadn't suspended the due process part of Constitution. I know that some things have been changed, but that one last time I checked, and I know for a fact because we went through this in my work, that all that happens when you try to do this, that is when you pass legislation that doesn't pass constitutional muster is that it never gets implemented because somebody sues immediately on constitutional grounds, and every judge always says, well, you'll have to hold it in abeyance until this is settled and so on, and so it never actually goes anywhere. So this, I agree thoroughly. I don't think this is going anywhere. It's a great political statement for those folks who believe that stuff, but I think we should oppose it on any number of grounds.
So I don't think we're going to spend a whole lot of time in our opposition, but it sounds like there's definitely consensus to say this is a really stupid bill and we oppose it and we don't want to see anybody suspending due process.
Right.
And leave it at that.
And I have to say, I haven't focused on the signs item, so I'm not prepared to address that one. Although I will say that when I first read it, I thought it was a very interesting bill, and I can go back and double check it.
This is the one that says when they turn your public right-of-ways into their personal business billboards, that you can bill them back for it, and they have to pay for the cleanup.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's great. I support that.
Yeah, I mean, and it certainly has been something that we almost practice because it takes, it's a real problem for public works employees to keep pulling things up. If you'd like me to have a statement for tomorrow on that, that's fine. We can have that dropped out.
Would we like to support that? Yes? No? Support? No? Move to support the sign one. Do I see any bobbleheads now?
I defer to
Okay, so we'll support that one.
And that will be one that you don't need to testify on. It'll simply be a statement.
Correct.
Okay.
I can't be in two places at once. Although
You've been doing very well, actually.
I can run back and forth across the hall.
The other things just that are coming up, I just want to remind people, on March 17th, there's the municipal revenues discussion, and Josh, you are going to be attending that in the county. Yes or no, perhaps? The discussion of the, I'm sorry? Okay.
Yeah, 9:30 on the 17th.
Right. The next thing is that in early April 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, it's the hearings on the operating budget for the county. Generally, the mayor appears at one of the early ones, but it may or may not work with your schedule. So we have always testified on the operating budget, and so that's something that I'd like to coordinate with on schedule and make sure that we know what we're saying, getting your feedback on comments we might want to make on the county's operating budget.
Okay. Are there any questions? Thank you. Well, now it's almost 9:30, and we get to the part that I thought we were going to get to it about 45 minutes before this. And I was going to say, and why don't we just see if we can wrap this one up by 10? But given that we're starting on it at 9:30, I'm not sure that's particularly reasonable. So maybe I'll just say let's see what we can do in 45 minutes on this one. And what I was going to do was give each of us a chance to talk for a couple of minutes about anything that you want to say about where you are at this point on the priorities, or where you think we ought to go. And I had already decided that what I was going to try was to start at the outside ends and bounce back and forth and work in toward the middle, and give everybody 2 or 3 minutes to just talk about whatever it is that you feel you need to talk about priorities, and then we'll go from there. So I was going to start with Josh, and then go to Dan, and then back to Colleen and Ruben and Terry and Doug and me.
Okay, thank you. I think we've made progress on our bubble chart item, and I continue to like the general concept of having some very large goals that is almost like a strategic plan, and then under those goals have more specific things that we're going to focus on, but that in any given year we wouldn't focus on all of the different areas. I've noticed that I think you guys have dealt with my MISI issues, which are the mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, so I appreciate that, but it seems much more clean about where things reside now. It still comes down to me to the brass tacks of choosing what we're going to work on, and probably more importantly, what we're not going to focus on or spend dollars or time on in any given year or 2-year period. So for me, I guess the first one falls under development and transportation, which is under sustainability and is economic development. I'm very supportive of the efforts to revitalize New Hampshire Avenue, the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. I'm also would want to see significant effort to put towards Old Town and the situation in Old Town now. And I know that there are other commercial areas in the city that other council members might have concern for. So to me, that says that economic development is a significant issue, and we need to figure out a way to staff it appropriately and have the right resources there and the right focus. The second for me, which I think falls under the last one around the last broad area, around engaged, responsive, and service-oriented organization. It doesn't feel like it's really captured in here. Maybe it's part of what's titled here feedback mechanism, but when I looked in the more detailed pages, I didn't see it. And it goes back to an issue I've talked about a number of times, which is constituent and council request management and responsiveness to constituents and council's requests. So I still find this to be wildly inconsistent. Sometimes it's amazingly great. I get a response back right away, and I think constituents find this as well. And then other times I don't hear back at all. And I think the only way that's going to be solved is if we invest in a process by which all those requests are logged in and kept track of, and action isn't working. I know we have this other thing we have invested in, but I don't know that it's not implemented yet, and I don't know that it's going to work. And I really think it'll only work if those requests and the management of those requests drive down to how employees actually do their job on a day-to-day. The third issue is the tax duplication for me, which I think falls under, can't remember if it's sustainability or, it is under sustainability. Yes, under financial viability. So I think we all know that issue pretty well, but I think we need to continue to commit resources to it and dedicate effort, and I'm still a fan of looking into, not to prescribe exactly what we should do at this point, but things like a lawsuit, what our legal options are, and still would love the closed session briefing we're supposed to get about that. Next for me is the environment, which also I think falls under sustainability, and Tacoma Park putting forth itself as a leader in what local communities can do. And then lastly is safety. I think we've made great strides on the safety side of things in terms of people feeling safe walking around. And the police chief has been a great hire and done a great job so far, but I think we can still do more on that. And things like spending resources on community, the community liaison officer, and funding Safe Tacoma, I think would be good steps in that direction. And I would also include within safety the preventative aspect of things like recreation and engaging youth. So those are my comments. I'm not sure how we're going to get from each of us giving our comments to, I'm not clear on the process, but I'll let it unfold.
Well, I figured I'd impose a little bit of order to see if we could get there. I'm not sure this will do it, but and since it's a work session, I'm going with first names, Dan.
So the order is outside to the
Yep,
inside?
bouncing to the middle.
Junior to senior. Got it. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. It is how it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of organization, clearly, that's gone into the three areas of focus, the priorities, sustainability, and livable community, and engaged, responsive, and service-oriented organization, and I support all those. I was at an economic restructuring meeting with Councilmember Wright. Oh, Josh, that's right, we're in work session, on Friday morning. And there was a good bit of discussion about, it started tending dangerously toward branding of Tacoma Park, but at least a sense of who are we and what do we stand for and what are we known for. And a number of ideas were kicked around, but green kept coming to the surface. And the more I thought about it over the last few days, the more I thought that that we should make the most of that, regardless of whether it's seen as branding or whatever. And really beyond that, that we should make really a concerted effort to follow the kind of recycling principles, reusing and reducing and recycling and those kind of green principles, and that should be, in my mind, it should be an overlay, or it could be an overlay for all of these elements. And back to Josh, when he talked about the street lights at the beginning of this meeting, I remembered a talk I'd had with a constituent on Sycamore Avenue, and he said, there's a new street light and there's an old street light, and it seems that that an appropriate path is, well, if we're going to do street lights, let's look at all the street lights and figure out how we reduce the amount of energy that goes into street lights, replacing the ones that are necessary along the way. So try to take something of a comprehensive approach. And so that's what's in my mind on the priorities. I think I trust staff to do good work, but I'd like to have that be an overriding priority, at least it's going to be mine during my time on the council. And I'm glad that Bruce Baker's here, because I know that he's done a lot of work that goes all the way back to the 2010 committee that we were both on in the 90s, when we tried to think of a strategic plan for Tacoma Park. And Bruce was talking even then about indicators, which could also be interpreted as measures. And I spoke a while back about the importance of not getting too measure happy. But indicators, I think, can be a powerful tool, because if we know where we are, we can tell how far we're going towards what the Post says, zero carbon emissions, where we need to be in not very many years from now. And I can envision a Tacoma Park that's producing very little in the way of carbon output, and that's the kind of Tacoma Park I'd like to envision.
Did you select the strategic plans? Are the samples out?
Different people gave ideas.
Well, thank you.
Mayor
You're
Williams
very
came
helpful.
up with the COG one. Sarah and I had been talking, and Sarah identified the Colorado Springs and Evanston one.
Thank you. The Colorado Springs one is my favorite one. So
I
special thank
thought
you
it
for
was
that.
particularly applicable to the kinds of things that the council has been talking about.
Great. So I like the sort of top-level structure, but the secondary stuff doesn't work for me so well, because I see the top-level piece in the way that we've structured it as really being cross-cutting initiatives and not items under which you can park particular program areas, essentially, exclusively. So I guess I'm in the opposite realm than where you are. And so there's a couple different models here. It's interesting to look at the one from Evanston, They have a lot more goals, though. They have 13 goals. That's a lot of goals. But if you look at their categories that they've developed, they're more suitable in that sense to that more separation by cylinder, because there's economic, strengthening community, and environmental sustainability. And the economics and the environmental ones are on the ends and they're more discrete, and then kind of everything else gets dumped into strengthening community. So I think with these titles that we have here, I don't think that would work for us as well. But the one for the Colorado one, I think, does work very good. If you look at the way they set up their strategic prioritized goals, they're very much like what we did: city services, sustainable growth, economic vitality, quality of life, and civic engagement, which I think is also a terrific one. And then I think it's very interesting that they have specific strategies. I think in some ways that this approach gets more to some of the struggle and frustration that we've had. So we might say, we've decided that a specific strategy is that we're going to keep the community center open on weekend evenings. And then there'll be a cost associated with that, and you'll tell us what that is. So that's my general comment there. Comment 2 is that thank you for laying out all of the different elements and doing all of the work for the long, short-term action item. Under resource implications, there's really only cost for a few of them. And the truth is that they all have some cost implication. It's just some of them we're already doing. But if we wanted to actually make decisions relative to trade-offs of things, we would have to know what all of the costs were for these various things, or what some sort of workload capability was. And that would probably come back down to filtering down to a third level, which was how this actually does play out, because we don't want to put all of the strategic goals and initiatives workload on the communications department or the housing and community development department. So we would have to know then how that lays out across the departments and get feedback on that. The last thing I'm going to say is I had a very interesting conversation with a gentleman from my office, Andrew Klein, who's just been selected as the budget director for the city of Baltimore, but right now he works in the budget office at the Corporation for National Service. And he's been working for a long time with the Long Branch, Silver Spring, Tacoma Indicators Project, and we went to lunch. And it was fascinating to hear him talk about all of these different things that he is working on, and a project that he's got buy-in from the county on to do more sustainable social indicators, and the kinds of things that I think are what we were talking about before, and what I've talked about before in terms of the sustainability issues. And I know that the group has had some conversations with other council members as well. And I think it's a very interesting project and could be incredibly useful to us in informing our planning and what we talked about for having goals and having kind of measurable outcomes. Plus, somebody else would do the measuring for us. And since that has been it's been a challenge, right? How are we going to put the burden of doing all this measuring? If to a broad extent we could link up some of these things to indicators that other people are measuring in our community and surrounding communities, we could also get a comparison, essentially, also between immediately surrounding areas. Thank you.
Well, I never know where to begin on these. I haven't had much of a chance to read the materials that you gave us, which is, of course, unfortunate. But anyway, so there may in fact be great ideas in them, but I don't have a good way of accessing them quickly like that. And I find that when I was thinking about the priorities, and I think the three that we have are a reasonable way to do it, the three sort of areas, and then pick stuff within it. I find that for my own thinking, it works better for me if I then have concrete reference for it, somewhat like Dan was talking about, actually. So for me, I'd love to see the recycling program expanded. We haven't expanded it in a long time. There's other kinds of recycling we could do. People get frustrated with being limited to sort of narrow neck bottles, you know. I'm using that sort of figuratively. There's items that could be recycled we're not doing. I also think that we could do more in educating the community on what they should do. That might be by bringing in people from the community to educate all of us. In other words, drawing on the resources that we have in the community. I think under transportation and development, I think in the I think we need to focus a lot more on mass transit than we have. Of course, we're working on the metro development, so and if that's not mass transit, I don't know what is. But I would also like to see some improvements in the ride-on bus service, which is pretty atrocious in Ward 5. Skipping around a bit, the one, well, yeah, let's just skip around a bit. That's a better way to do it. On the second one, livable community, everything looks pretty fine to me except for two things. One, under recreation, that's a very broad, to me, very broad, and the council has expressed many times its interest in focusing on recreation in the near future, and I would like to see, in particular, some more focus on youth, particularly mentoring programs. And then under housing, something that's not there, which was mentioned the last time, and that had to do with what I call mansionization. I think that that actually would fit under an environmental concern as well as housing and sustainability and livability. I think we need to, Tacoma Park needs to explore how to deal with mansionization in a proactive way. And on the last one, engaged, responsive, and service-oriented, the thing that struck me is, from looking at the survey, was the differences between wards 4, 5, and 6. I think that the city could do more in working with community organizations and increasing engagement of people. I think we get a lot of, when I go out and talk to folks, I get a lot of ideas that have not come up anywhere else by talking to citizens. One of the things I love about Tacoma Park is just about everybody knows something about the issues, has ideas, things they've thought about. They're often not what's being discussed publicly, but are new things. So I think an emphasis on community outreach, particularly in wards 4, 5, and 6, would be very valuable. And I'll stop.
Thank you. First of all, I really appreciate the work that the staff has put into developing the bubble chart and all the various tasks underneath it. I think it's a great step towards beginning the development of a strategic plan. I think strategic planning is definitely a good way of organizing an organization, and yet I'm concerned that we're trying to develop at least beginning to develop a strategic plan in a very short term with very little input from all the stakeholders. I think that for where the city is right now, where the city government is right now, and what I think we need to do as a council, I think we need to give more clear direction to each of the departments rather than working at this very grand plan that crosses many different areas. I would like to see us develop priorities by department. And I'll give you a few examples. I'm not going to have time to get through all this, but for example, in the recreation department, I would like us to set a priority to maximize use of the recreational facilities within Tacoma Park city limits. So we would use our city resources, such as the bus, to bring people to the community center and to the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center so that we can have young people from wards 5 and 6 especially coming to this community center and being able to benefit from it, and using the bus to do that rather than take people to a funeral somewhere out of town or to buffets and shopping trips. I'd like to see us maximize the resource utilization through the use of public and private partnerships and volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers and active groups in this community that the rec department could be working more closely with to serve the community better. I think the recreation department should strive for program participants to parallel the diversity of city residents and to bring the divergent elements together. Coordinate with the city police department and local county schools to design programs that provide an overall improvement in education, health, and safety of Tacoma Park residents. Again, if you look at this, I'm saying that I don't think that we're getting the service that we want from the various departments in the city at this point to be talking about some of the grander plans that we see in the materials before us tonight. I had this, recommendations laid out by department. I've distributed that to the council members here. Again, there's not going to be enough time to go through this whole thing, but I will say that under the administration area of our government, I think an important part is to facilitate the development of a strategic plan for the city that works with all the stakeholders and probably use a facilitator who's familiar with developing a strategic plan to help us to lay out a plan, and that would probably take a year or two to accomplish. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to repeat anything else that anybody else has said tonight, and Ruben has promised me he will kick me sharply in the shin if I do. But by way of opening my comments here, it just seems to me in reading all of these things that we have before us that for a city the size of Tacoma Park, we have way too many priorities for the time that we have in order to act on them and the staff that we had. Did I say way too many times? Or can I say them a few more times? It just seems to me that some real focus is needed here. And, one way maybe to look at the focus is we seem to have a lot of goals that rest pretty much on the planning and economic development department in order to, and housing in order to effectuate. And then secondly, there are a few people maybe involved in the public works area and certainly some in recreation and of course the police, but it seems like a lot of these goals fall on the shoulders of an extremely small and already work to the maximum staff. Are we setting ourselves up for failure by focusing on these areas given the staffing limitations that we have? I'd like to see, as Ruben suggested, more focus on the wards that did not do well in the recent survey, those who said they felt the quality of life was low. I think we all should be concerned about that, and we all ought to be asking ourselves within these bubbles and boxes, how can we address the concerns of these citizens? And, certainly my interest is along the New Hampshire corridor with the redevelopment efforts that are currently underway. And it spills into the adjoining neighborhoods as well that will be affected by this. And I see in that area a lot of these objectives, the ones that we should have, but it's questionable whether we have the staffing to do what we would like to do, come together. Things like code enforcement, the cross-jurisdictional policing, the affordable housing, the environmental concerns, particularly along Sligo Creek, and then, of course, we have the future of the hospital land tucked in there as well. So if we can somehow get that area right, then I think we'll be in good shape for getting other things right as well. One of the things that we certainly could look at in the communication area is the 311 effort that's being done by the county. I mean, here is sort of a low-cost approach to things. We've had computer-generated email systems and so forth for tracking complaints. None of that, I mean, this has generated more complaints in some ways than it has actually resolved them. And it may be something so simple as a telephone number where people can call. The other emphasis that I would like to see, and I'm glad to see it noted here, is in improving the coordination between different departments. Here we have sort of the cross-training of police and the public works department, so that everybody on the street, every set of feet, every body that we have is working together to report on things that are going wrong, things that are out, things that are poorly maintained, problems that they come across, and feeding that in to a structure within the city that will, within a certain short time frame, be on those problems and having them resolved fairly quickly. One of the ideas that I'd like to throw out then in summing up is maybe the possibility of doing some training on total quality management for cities, this TQM for short. It was a big management fad in the 80s and 90s. You don't hear about it as often as you used to be, maybe because it wasn't. You're kicking me.
Bruce remembers when we did it.
He remembers that. Well, now it's different approaches now. There's a whole other literature after Bruce did it. I'm sure he did a good job.
TQM is a dirty word in Tacoma Park.
Well, there's different kinds of TQMs. Let's put it that way. And I would ask the mayor and others to withhold judgment until my comments, especially critical judgment, until my comments are, that's not TQM. That's not an example. TDB, too damn bad. But anyway, I'll call it Kaizen then, which is the Japanese form of it, after they took Edwards Deming and taught him a thing or two about how to apply it over there. But the point being is that, you know, there are practices, there are principles, there are methodologies that not to say that we should return to the well where we've been, but what's new, or is there anything new out there that we might be able to apply that would improve service, which is good. You know, already we have seen through the results of the survey, people in general are happy and satisfied with the services, but I think we need to go the extra mile, particularly in the way we communicate with each other, both within the city staff to council, city manager to council. There's work that needs to be done there. It's good work, it's important work, it's work I think we can accomplish successfully.
I've been given everybody, I've been setting the clock with pretty well. After I let the buzzer go on Josh, I thought I wouldn't let the buzzer go that way, but we've been doing pretty well. I think the overall approach. The overall approach is the right way to go. I think taking the effort, not in the short term, but in the long term, to have a strategic plan is the way to go. My feeling about the way the city has done priorities in the past is that we've tended to get stovepiped into certain ones that's what everybody's focusing on. We know we have these other issues out here, but you know, I think in many ways the priorities do and should drive some budget decisions. It's very helpful for the city manager to know what our priorities are as she draws up her proposed budget, and it's good for us to keep those in mind as we react to that budget and see if there's some changes that we want to make. As I think it was Doug talked about.
TQM?
No, it wasn't TQM. It wasn't TQM. I'll come back to it. I just lost that one. Yeah, I don't know. I had a point. I'm not going to go there. So I think Some of Terry's suggestions here about departmental focused objectives are very good. I think it can be very helpful to focus in that way. I think it needs to be within the context of this larger bubble chart, for lack of something else to call it right now. And I think the three headings on that are very good. The one that kind of grabs me the most is the sustainability one, the first one. I particularly think that it's timely to focus on the environmental stewardship piece. Like Dan, I feel like green can diffuse through everything we do, and that the city has had that focus in the past. When we did our greenhouse gas reduction plan, we kind of let that drop by the wayside. The way a number of entities all up and down the chart are focusing on green issues now, I think means that we need to do the same and tie into those. There's been an initiative at the Council of Governments that is going to try and tie this all together regionally. We're part of Hickley. I think the whole focus on that needs to be pretty sharp. I know what the point was now. You were right in saying that a lot of these tend to fall under, I never remember which it's called. It's been housing and community development, economic development. It changes, but it's that Sarah's department. And I think if we recognize that we have a lot of priorities in that area, it may drive a budget decision about if we want to do those. It means that her department would need some help. And the way we have generally addressed that in the time that I've been on the council is we have generally maintained about the same number of full-time equivalent staff. When we see a priority, we don't just hire somebody and then we just keep growing and growing and growing. I think that tends to be the solution at the county. We always tend to shift things around and generally keep the same number of people. So sometimes we may not be able to do that, but I think we have to have that understanding of what our priorities are and know that if that's going to happen, it has those budget implications. And we're coming up on the time when we're going to need to focus on that. I think the economic development under the development and transportation piece is extremely important for what we need to do, as I talked about in the campaign earlier in the year. We need to focus I think in a different way on how we look at how we do economic development. I'm very encouraged by the Main Street program, and I'm encouraged by the charrette that the city ran on the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. I think those two areas are extremely important for what's going to be coming down the pike in the next decade. And I think the financial viability piece of the sustainability one is also very important, that not only having a long-range financial plan, but we need to at least think about some other pieces that tie into that, like continuity of operations plans. The tax duplication issues hopefully will be resolved sometime in the next year. And looking at facilities also will be helpful. I think the other areas we have to continue to keep some focus on, but I think we need to have the larger structure and then be able to shift with some agility in that as we go forward. I think the various councils over the years have tended to kind of either follow through with some of the same goals or said, okay, we'll shift to some other ones, but they haven't really hung together in this larger structure. And I think if we take the time over the long term to put this together as the strategic plan, and then we will have set up something for this council and councils in the future to be able to work from, I haven't had a chance to look at the ones that were handed out this evening, but if we can use those as a model and get some input from other folks and go forward with that in the long term, that would be great, and kind of keep that as the structure and work within it to, for now, to outline the areas that are our main concern. And as we get to the down to some of those areas, look at Terry's list and similar ones that we might add to it, and see what we want to kind of give the city manager as our sense of some of the directions to that she could then give to the departments for what would fit into this overall strategic plan. Suzanne.
Just want to make a couple comments explaining some of the materials that we handed to you. As Doug mentioned, there's lots of kind of planning related activities. Many of those are driven by outside forces, and so one of the things that I did want to call attention to was the fact that whether it's the Metro or whether it's Purple Line or it's some of the joint activities with the county on economic development, I've laid those out in here because one of the questions or comments that came up from the previous meeting was, there's some things we may have to do. And so there are some of those things I wanted to call out. The other thing, I know Barb has some comments about some of the budget implications, but when we looked at this, what we tried to do was lay out what we could do as a community as a city to address these larger goals. And I think there are things that can be juggled around in there. We certainly are looking for your direction as to the priorities, because it's a huge plate, even though we think all of these things are important and should be done. And so some things are on the table that have to be there. Other things have some decision points. And Barb, you wanted to talk a little bit, for example, on the environmental item?
Yeah, just very briefly, given the lateness of the hour, I do appreciate many of the council members' comments about the need to focus. As Suzanne indicated, there's some of these activities that I think were included in the materials that are kind of an institutional part of what we do or what the city kind of has committed to. I'm obviously spending a lot of time this week. I'm not readily available. I'm in budget meetings and will be pretty much through probably early April, quite frankly. But this is sort of the heart of it, where I'm reviewing departmental budget requests. And I've also been having significant discussions with Ms. Brooks about revenues. I would say as the council works through the priorities, my guess is my budget, truthfully, is going to be in development probably before you finish this process, in all likelihood. Because pretty much by early next week, I'm starting to cut off numbers and have to put together my recommended budget. That's kind of the timing we have to get into to get the other pieces into the document to the council in April. I would say in looking at revenues, I think the council is well aware of the fact that tax duplication payments, thankfully, were frozen, I think, at current year levels, because I think the alternative, while the Revenue Sharing Task Force is doing its work, as we all found out last year, we could have actually lost a significant amount of money. So we're not going to experience any increase in tax duplication payments for 2009. There's certainly an indication, based on the information we have from SHA, that we may experience a decline or a reduction in highway user revenues. Statewide, they are predicting a decrease of income taxes by about 1%. That's at a statewide global level. It's very difficult to try to do accurate projections for your municipality, and we have tried a number of different things to do that, and just got some information today from the chief economist at Montgomery County. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a municipality, there are very, very limited opportunities in Maryland to raise revenues. Those that are some of our major revenue sources, unfortunately, we're not going to see an increase, and in fact may see a reduction. We will continue to refine the revenue numbers pretty much probably until about 10 days before I deliver the budget to this council, because we do try to keep those as up to date as we can. I think as you go through your priorities, certainly that will come into play. I think more than anything else, what Ms. Brooks and I have talked a lot about is just sort of the long-term financial stability of the city. There are some issues that I will flag in my budget message that I'm sure not time to address tonight, but besides the fact we're not experiencing revenue growth, we are obviously having to make sure that we're competitive in terms of attracting and retaining good employees. Right now, based on the information from our broker, we are likely to experience a 14% increase in health insurance costs One of the things I would like to talk to the council about during the budget process is the police pension plan and funding issues related to that. I think as many of the council members are aware, we broke away from the state plan a number of years ago. Unfortunately, we have experienced a very high rate of disability in the police department, and that is basically driving costs significantly, and will do so for some time to come. I need to have some further discussions with the actuary for the plan. I'm not trying to be overly gloomy. I think throughout my tenure here, I have certainly tried and have reduced or eliminated positions in my own department, have tried to basically restructure positions to meet other needs in the city, but quite frankly, I think I'm out of tricks in all candor. So I think as you go forward in setting your priorities, and clearly there's a lot of interest in the environmental side of things, as was reflected in the materials that Suzanne worked with the departments to put together. There are things that are going on in each of the departments. Ultimately, it's going to be the council's judgment whether or not those activities that we're able to do with existing staff are good enough or sufficient. I would say that I would encourage the council to be judicious in terms of adding staff, though I do think if you want to make major strides in the environmental area, that's what it will take. I would hope that the council has the opportunity to make whatever decisions you're going to make in that area in the broader context of the budget, because I do think FY09 is going to be a tough year, quite frankly.
One other just piece of information is next week we'll be talking with you about facilities and some of our costs related to perhaps auditorium, perhaps park work, a variety of things. And so as that comes up, that also needs to be factored in the overall balance.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to offer a couple of ways to Councilmember Berry, because I think he understated the situation. I'd also like to call attention to Bruce Baker, who's here with us tonight at this hour. He is one of the individuals working with the group on indicators, and I look forward to the budget discussions and maybe how we can not only talk about goals, but also talk about how to measure those goals. And I think the Indicators Project, as Councilmember Clay said, is an interesting way of doing that. And just one last request, as you're looking at facility expenditures, I hope you're considering Public Works, because that is a dismal place.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Nobody's clamoring to talk. What we need to do, I think, is try and flag a couple of issues as priorities. And
Can I suggest we mull this over and get back together?
Yes. I wanted to get an indication, a general indication at this point that people are generally happy with the structure here that we've got in front of us to work from, and we'll come back to this with suggestions for some prioritization. Do people feel that if we kind of, in what we've got here, if we accept A, B, and C as the overalls, do we want to look at priorities within the next level, the numbers on the bubble chart, or do you want to say, no, I don't want to be limited to that, we might want to kind of go at it from some other direction? I'm just looking for general direction here, so that people are tending to move in the same way rather than all scattered.
My feeling about it, as I said earlier, is that this is, and I again turn to Councilmember Berry's comments, I think it's a good framework to start talking about a strategic plan, but it's way too much for where we are today with priorities, and that we should be just listing out, using that as a way to pick out some of the priorities that we want, but come up with our short list of priorities to govern the next year and a half, and that one of those priorities should be to develop a strategic plan that would use this as fodder for that development.
Other comments? Josh?
I'm okay with A, B, and C. I think I'm not quite able to say whether I whether I'm willing to vote at the 1, 2, 3 level or the small ABCs yet. And I just think the other thing we should think about as we go away is push ourselves to not only think what do we want the priorities to do, but actively say what we're not going to work on, what we're going to tell the city staff that they should not spend time on. Because I think there's a tendency when to say, yes, we want you to do these, and then when someone says, well, we're not going to improve this recycling program, people say, what? Well, we have to make some of those choices where we say we're not going to do. And I'm not necessarily saying that about the recycling program at this point, but we need to really force ourselves to decide on here what we're not going to do and put X's next to it.
Ruben.
Josh has brought up a really interesting point, and the way I was trying to think about it, to get out of that box, was things we were going to work on heavily this year, things we were going to work on heavily next year, and so on, as a way of saying, it's not that, C under one particular thing we're not going to do, it's just that it's going to be, if staff has time to work on it, great, but this year we're focusing on B, and next year we'll turn to C, and do that sort of ordering rather than this thing of, well, we're going to this and not do that, because I think that's just untenable.
I think it's hard to think about it in a year, because you take like redoing New Hampshire Avenue. That's not a year focus.
Well, some things are longer.
Yeah, but I think most of and that's the key, is choosing those bigger things that we really want to focus on for some chunk of time. And so I hear you about that, but I think there are also going to be tough decisions that have to be made that we really do say, we're not going to work on X, Y, and Z in the next 2 years. That's not to say it's not important. It's not that we don't care about it, but we are going to have to make some choices. So
I think those things work when you're looking at a strategic plan that talks about the whole government and everything. Right now, this is a mix of some ongoing things that we do and some initiatives that we want to do. I don't think we have the comprehensive list to really be measuring those things.
Any other comments? We're adjourned.
All my stuff.